Welcome to Chapter 4 of this series. We're going to take a look at one of the scary words, encapsulation. So what is this? Luckily, it's just technical jargon, and it's really just refers to visibility. The visibility of your properties and the visibility of your methods, or, easier put, the variables and the functions within a class. So we're going to take a look at an example here. I've created a new chapter for this a new project for this chapter called OOP_4. I have a index.php file, which is including myclass.php, and I have a blank page. So we're going to experiment with applying visibility to our properties and methods, which incidentally is new to PHP 5. All right, so class, myclass. We're going to take a look at some kind of common practices for your coding, especially when you're working with teams. You're kind of expected to code in a certain way. So, there's no hard rules. You're free to make your own, but in general, it's best to adopt what others have done. So the Send framework, they have a standard that says things like opening curly braces should be on their own line. It says that you should use single quotes for your values. So var equals single quote my value. There's nothing special about these, but by making it consistent, it's easier to pass around between team members and team member. We'll take a look at more of these as we progress. Okay, so what I want to do here is simply declare a variable, or declare a property, which is more proper. And this property, by default, has a visibility of public. So a public visibility means that it can be accessed from this class, it can be accessed from a child class, and it can be accessed from the object that calls it. So let's create a class, public, and my var equals my value. Keep it simple. So you might have noticed before, to keep it simple, I just did it like this, and you can get away with it. This is okay. But once again, going back to the standard, you need to prefix with the visibility. It's a good practice. And now you'll notice that the error goes away. Once again, a great thing about NetBeans. So let's take a look at what that did say. If I hover over here, unexpected my var, expected function, constant, var, static, abstract, final, private, protected, or public. So it wants you to declare it. Public variable. Okay, so now we want to access this property. So within PHP, let's go ahead and then create a new instance of the class. MyClass equals new instance of the MyClass class. So now I'm going to call MyClass, and you can see here I have access to that variable that we created. So I'm going to give you a quick example here. We're going to change this to private, and I'm not going to explain it just yet, but I do want you to keep this in the back of your mind. When it's private, I can't access it. It doesn't even give me the option. All right, keep that in the back of your mind. Let's go back to public. So if I want to access that value, I can do this. Now remember, when we are using the $sign to access properties, we do not use the variable prefix of a $sign. The same way as if you're accessing a property from within the class, you omit it. Okay, so if we do this, this is going to refer to my value, but we're not echoing it out. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Echo my class, my var. I'm going to right click and choose run file, and we get my value, sure enough. So this is seemingly convenient, and at first thought you might think, okay, let's just make all of them properties. I want to have access to everything in my class. I don't want any restrictions. Well, that wouldn't be a smart choice. And the reason is because there are going to be times within your classes when you don't want whoever's using your class to have access to it. So there could be properties and methods that never need to be accessed. This is why the comparison to a car with classes is so common. If you've ever read any kind of introductory to OOP, they always reference a car because it's truthfully a really good example, even though it's not applicable to web development. So the common one is the accelerate method. Imagine there's a class and a method for acceleration. They can call accelerate, and they know that's going to take care of accelerating, and they don't need to know what's happening behind the scenes, whatever kind of engine work is being done. So you could have variables and methods that actually handle the process of acceleration while we're continuing this comparison that the user of the class never even needs to know about. Those are the times when you would make your properties and your methods either private or protected, and we'll go over the difference between those. So let's going back, and if we want to make a property or a method only accessible from within its own class, we're going to make it private. And this means that it's just letting me know right here that this variable hasn't been used, and it hasn't. This lets us know that nowhere can it be accessed from outside of this class. Even if I create a child class, I cannot access this variable. So now if we echo it one more time, and I go back to my browser, refresh, we're going to receive this error. By the way, if you're not seeing these errors, make sure you have display errors set to true in your php.ini file. Cannot access private property my class. Notice private property, because you're not supposed to. We've set it up that they cannot access this variable or this property. So if you did want to access it, or we wanted to give the user a way to access it, this is when you use something called getters and setters. So we could do something like, and it's more common, it's possible to see in a class where there are no getters and setters, and that's okay. There are classes where you only need to retrieve values and not set values. It just depends on the project. So if I create a new method, I'm not going to use dot blocks because it's simple here. I create a new function or a new method called getMyVar. And all we're going to do here is return this. Remember, I cannot simply do this. That does not work. We're in a class. We need to go up to the object or up to the class and then find it. So return this, which refers to the object, myvar, and you see it is available to us. And notice this is very helpful too. You see that little lock symbol within NetBeans? It lets us know this is a private variable. So let's save that and come back, and now we need to call this getter method. So instead of trying to access that variable directly, I'm just going to grab it this way, getMyVar. Come back to this page, and now we do have access to this. So if I come back to NetBeans, the advantage to this is that the user now has no control, assuming that we don't have a setter, they have no control over this value, which is maybe what we want. So before, if we were to change this back to a public property, and we go back to index.php, and I were to say, my class, myvar equals new value, and then we're going to do my class echo my class myvar. Let's come back. You can see we've changed this. So you want to be careful and you want to be stingy when you're creating your classes, and always think, will the user of this class ever have a need to access this property or this method? And if the answer is yes, then chances are you need to make the method public. And remember, by default, it is public, but it's a best practice to go ahead and declare the visibility of all your properties and methods. Now, if it's something different, maybe you're doing some kind of an operation to, I don't know, you're going to filter through an array and make it cleaner or turn it into a multi-dimensional array, something that they don't even need to know is happening. In that case, make it private. Make it a private method. Now, there is a convention when creating private variables, private properties, and private methods, and it's to remind you that you're dealing with a private property or method, and that's to precede it with an underscore. So in this case, because let's say we change this to private, because it's private, we would want to add an underscore, and that gives you a reminder, especially if somebody else is using the property, that gives them a reminder, okay, this is a private property. Same thing with methods. So, what's the difference between private and protected? Very similar, but the only difference is private is exclusive to this class and this class only. But what if you want to give the user the option, or anybody the option, to take your class and extend it so it does even more than it did originally? In those cases, and you'll learn this in a future chapter, they can create a new class and extend it. And just quickly, the idea is to do my new class, and then they would say extends my class. And now what happens is it can inherit any of the values from the class up here, assuming it has access to them. We'll go over that in more detail soon. But when you change something to protected, this now means this class has access to it, and any of its child classes that inherit from this class can have access to it as well. So remember, private is the stingiest. Use private when nothing can ever have access to the method or property again. Use protected if you want to have access from this class, and then maybe if you want to extend it later or have somebody else extend it later and have access to those methods, you would make that protected. And use public if it's a method, and many of your methods will be public. Let's say you're building a database class and your method is, I don't know, get. And it's just going to be a wrapper, and it's going to go for the database, and you're going to pass in, I don't know, a table name, and maybe a limit or how many rows to receive, something like that. This case, this should be a public method because you want the user to be able to call it. And you would want them to be able to do get and then pass in their variables. That's a perfect example of making it public. If you were to make it private here, they could never access that, all right? So if you want the user to access the method or the property, make it public. Otherwise, decide whether it needs to be private or protected. So hopefully that makes sense. And it's a big word, encapsulation. It's a scary word, but it's just technical jargon to refer to adding visibility to your properties and your methods to make your code more manageable and more easier for the user to use. And that's encapsulation.